All right, so today we're diving deep into a story that really seems to have captured the internet's attention.
It has.
And it all revolves around a squirrel named Peanut. It's one of those stories that, on the surface seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
But as you start to peel back the layers,
well,
you realize there's a lot more going on here.
absolutely. I mean, this is one of those things that we talk about, where it's something that seems so simple and so small
Mm-hmm.
really taps into much deeper
Yeah.
kind of anxieties that I think a lot of people are feeling right now in our culture.
And there's so much passion around this story. Like, I knew people loved squirrels, but the level of, outrage and accusations, and a lot of it really targeted at Kamala Harris and the Democrats.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty intense.
And that's the thing. I mean, the internet is such a powerful amplifier, especially when you throw things like AI-generated images into the mix, and all the emotion that comes with that.
AI-generated images. Okay, wait, hold on. We need to back up for a second. I think some of our listeners might need a little refresher on Peanut's story itself.
Definitely. Yeah, so let's start with this. Peanut was an incredibly popular squirrel. I mean, a true internet celebrity with thousands of followers online. And that was all thanks to his owner, Mark Longo.
Right.
Longo would post all these videos, really heartwarming ones, of him interacting with Peanut, playing, cuddling, just typical adorable squirrel
No,
things.
I saw those videos. Were those the ones where Peanut was wearing that little tiny hat?
That's the one.
Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about cuteness overload, right?
Absolutely. But here's the thing. Owning a squirrel as a pet in New York City is actually against the law.
Really?
Yeah, unless you have a special permit.
Huh. I did not know that. And Longo didn't have one.
No, he didn't. And this is where things get complicated. And there's a lot of speculation that it might have been internet trolls reported Longo to the authorities. And so New York Animal Care and Control stepped in and confiscated Peanut.
Confiscated. So they just took him away.
Yeah.
So what happened then? What happened next?
Well, just 48 hours later, Peanut was euthanized.
Yeah.
And that's what really ignited this firestorm of outrage online.
48 hours. That seems awfully quick. Was there no attempt to, find him another home or anything?
That's part of what's fueling the anger and frustration. For many people, especially those already skeptical of Kamala Harris and the Democrats,
Right.
they see this as a clear example of government overreach.
I can see how it feeds into that narrative. And it's interesting how all these AI-generated images started popping up almost immediately. The ones with Trump protecting squirrels or Peanut depicted as an angel with a MAGA hat.
Right.
It's like, talk about a visual representation of how this story has become so symbolic.
It is. And it's worth taking a moment to unpack these AI images for folks who might not be familiar. This technology basically uses algorithms to create these super realistic looking images from text prompts. So someone can type in Trump holding a squirrel and boom, an image is generated.
Wow.
The issue is these images bypass traditional fact-checking processes. So they can easily become a breeding ground for misinformation.
So people are seeing these images and just assuming they're real.
Exactly.
No wonder this is spreading like wildfire. It's like a visual echo chamber, just bouncing these images back and forth and reinforcing those pre-existing beliefs.
Absolutely. And in this case, it plays directly into these existing fears about government control, the erosion of individual freedoms, that sort of thing.
Right. And then you have Longo's side of the story. I read his statement, and I mean, the heartbreak just jumps off the page. He's pleading for compassion, talking about how Peanut was more than just a pet. He was family.
Right.
I mean, it's hard not to feel for the guy.
It is. And his emotional plea is really resonating with a lot of people. It taps into this very primal fear, this idea that the government can intrude into your life and take away something you love, something that brings you joy.
It's funny. I live in a big city surrounded by millions of people, but this story, for some reason, has me thinking about our connection to nature and how it can feel so fragile sometimes.
That's an interesting observation. It's like Peanut's story has become this sort of symbolic battleground
Right.
for these bigger questions about individual liberty and how we relate to the natural world
Yeah.
in an increasingly urbanized society.
And let's not forget, this is all happening against the backdrop of New York City's current political climate. There's this growing narrative, right, that the city is declining, that it's overrun by crime, homelessness, and that the government is focused on all the wrong things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, just to add fuel to the fire, Elon Musk weighs in with a tweet about the whole situation.
He does.
So what did he say? What did Elon Musk have to say about all this?
Well, it was a pretty short tweet, something along the lines of, "Why are the Democrats so cruel to squirrels?" But,
Ugh.
coming from someone with his massive platform,
Right.
it really amplified that outrage, like tenfold.
Wow, talk about pouring gasoline on a fire. I guess that's the power of social media influencers these days. One tweet and suddenly, boom, a local story becomes national news.
Absolutely. And I think it highlights something really important. We're increasingly getting our news and forming our opinions from sources outside those traditional media outlets.
Right.
And while these online spaces can offer, really diverse perspectives, which is great, they often lack that same level of fact-checking and
Yeah.
accountability.
It's like we're all trying to navigate this massive information jungle, right? Just trying to figure out what's real, what's not, what's signal, what's noise.
Uh,
And with a story like this, with all the emotion swirling around, it's so easy to get swept up and lose sight of the nuances.
it is, and that's why I think critical thinking is so crucial these days.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you come across a story like this online, especially something that triggers those strong emotions,
Mm-hmm.
it's essential to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Ask those critical questions.
Like what?
Like, who's telling the story? What's their agenda? Are there other perspectives that I need to consider that I'm not seeing?
It's true. It's like, on one hand, you have people who are genuinely devastated about Peanut's death. They feel like the city really overreacted.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, you have those pointing to the law,
Yeah.
the potential risks of keeping wild animals as pets. It's
Exactly.
not as clear cut as it might seem when you first hear about it.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that often both sides are coming from a place of concern, right?
Right.
I mean, animal lovers on both sides
Mhm.
want what's best for animals, even if they disagree on how to achieve that.
It's about finding that balance, isn't it, between individual rights and the need for, regulations and laws.
Exactly. And navigating that balance, especially in a city as complex and diverse as New York,
Yeah.
is incredibly challenging. And it's worth noting that this isn't the first time that New York City's animal control policies have been scrutinized. Remember the debates around the pigeon culls a few years back?
Oh, yeah, those were controversial. I remember people were outraged saying it was inhumane.
Right.
But the city argued it was necessary to, control the pigeon population.
Exactly. And you see how these situations often boil down to these differing perspectives.
Mm.
City agencies are tasked with balancing the needs of millions of people
Mm-hmm.
with the well-being of, various animal populations. And sometimes that means making these tough decisions that won't please everyone.
Yeah, for sure. But going back to Peanut, what I find so fascinating is how his story has become this symbol. It's like a Rorschach test, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at the same image, but seeing something completely different.
It is remarkable, isn't it? He's become this symbol for, well, everything. Government overreach, animal cruelty, the decline of New York City, even the power of social media. It's almost like he's holding up this mirror
Mm-hmm.
to our collective anxieties.
And it's made me think about our relationship with animals, too, especially in a world that's changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
We're increasingly disconnected from nature, living in these concrete jungles. And I wonder if stories like this, like Peanuts, tap into this yearning for connection, for
Mhm.
something pure, something simple.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Animals offer us this unconditional love, this sense of peace, this sense of wonder. And when that's threatened, it
Yeah.
triggers a very primal protective instinct.
It does. It makes me wonder, where do we even draw the line between wild and domesticated these days?
Well,
Can a squirrel truly be a pet in the same way a dog or a cat can?
that's a question that's getting more and more complex, I think, as we learn more about animal cognition, animal intelligence.
Right.
Our understanding of what constitutes sentience is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And as it does, so too do our ethical responsibilities towards other species.
It feels like this whole story, this whole conversation, is less about Peanut the squirrel himself
Mm-hmm.
and more about what he represents. It's like he's become this blank canvas,
Right.
and people are projecting all their fears, their hopes, their anxieties about the world onto him.
That's a powerful way to put it. He's become this lightning rod for our collective anxieties. Anxieties about the future, about control, about our place in this increasingly complex world.
And all of this stemming from a single squirrel. It's incredible how these seemingly small incidents can trigger such profound reflections on our values, our beliefs, our fears.
That's the power of storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It has this unique ability to connect us, to spark these difficult conversations,
Mhm.
and to challenge us to confront our own assumptions about the world.
It's like Peanut's story, even in its tragedy. is reminding us that the world is full of complexities, full of gray areas, and that true understanding requires us to look beyond the surface,
Absolutely
to
right.
embrace those nuances, even when it's uncomfortable.
It is. And in a world that is so increasingly dominated by sound bites and viral trends and these very polarized opinions,
Hmm.
that ability to engage with complexity with nuance is more vital now than ever.
So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into this curious case of Peanut the squirrel,
Yeah.
I'm left with this lingering question. What does it all mean? What do we take away from all of this?
Well, I think for me, the biggest takeaway is don't underestimate the power of a single story.
Hmm.
It can spark these national debates, challenge those deeply held beliefs,
Hmm.
force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us.
And it's a reminder that we're all part of this intricate web of life. We're
Right.
connected in ways that we often fail to grasp. Our actions, even the ones that seem insignificant, can have these ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate circle.
Absolutely. And as we navigate this increasingly complex world, right,
Yeah.
bombarded by information from all sides, it's more important than ever to cultivate that critical
Uh-huh.
thinking, to question our assumptions,
Right?
to engage with different perspectives, even those we might disagree with.
Because ultimately, we're all in this together,
Right.
right?
We want,
We're sharing this planet, navigating the complexities of modern life, trying to make sense of a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
and maybe, just maybe,
Uh-huh.
stories like Peanuts can serve as a reminder of that shared humanity, a reminder to pause,
Mhm.
to listen, to empathize,
Yeah.
and to approach these complex issues with a little bit more compassion
Yeah.
and a lot less judgment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this feeling of, I guess, hope. Hope that even in the face of all this division and disagreement, we can find ways to connect, to learn from each other,
Yeah.
and to create a world that's a little bit kinder, a little bit more understanding, and a whole lot more squirrel friendly.
Yeah, it's like this whole story has accidentally become this like a master class in media literacy and critical thinking and also just the power of storytelling.
It really has. And I
Yeah.
think I think it highlights something too that we haven't really touched on. It's like this emotional component to all of this.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the political arguments, the legal debates,
Right.
but at its heart, this is a story about loss. It's about grief.
Hmm.
It's about the bond between a man and his squirrel.
You're right. It's easy to forget that there's a real person at the center of this whole whirlwind, a person who lost a companion,
Yeah.
a friend.
Yeah.
And that loss has resonated with so many people, no matter what they think about the politics of it all,
Yeah.
or, even animal ownership in general.
It speaks to something so universal, doesn't it? That pain of losing something you love.
That feeling of powerlessness that you can feel when you're dealing with, bureaucracy.
Totally.
And that shared experience, that's what gives this story its staying power, I think.
It's also made me think about like how we even define family in a world that's constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for Longo, Peanut was family. And while that might seem unusual to some people,
Yeah.
who are we to judge the bonds that bring people comfort and joy?
I think it challenges our assumptions about what's a valid emotional connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a society that often prioritizes, individualism,
Yeah.
self-reliance,
Right.
maybe there's something powerful in acknowledging all the different ways that we find connection, that we find meaning.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of the bigger picture here, just recognizing the need for empathy, for understanding that everyone's coming to the story with their own baggage, their own experiences, values, perspectives.
It's about having those tough conversations, but with open hearts and minds,
Yes,
even when we disagree.
totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the real learning happens. It's not about like silencing people or shutting down debate. It's about engaging with those different viewpoints, trying to see where people are coming from, and hopefully finding that common ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? We're
Yeah.
all sharing this planet, navigating this crazy thing called modern life, trying to make sense of a world that often feels pretty chaotic, pretty unpredictable.
And maybe, just maybe,
Mm,
stories like Peanuts can serve as a reminder of that shared humanity that we have,
yeah.
a reminder to pause, to listen,
Mm,
to empathize,
mm,
and to approach these complex issues with a little bit more compassion
right.
and a lot less judgment.
Mm. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling, I don't know, hopeful maybe. Hopeful that even with all the division and disagreement out there, we
Hmm.
can still find ways to connect with each other, to learn from each other,
Yeah,
and to create a world that's a little bit kinder, a little bit more understanding,
for sure.
and hey, maybe even a little bit more squirrel friendly too.